And I think that brings us to the main event of the evening. We're absolutely thrilled to have John on the team. When we looked at this topic, we wanted to find people who have got real practical experience of not just migrating to the cloud. We've all migrated to the cloud, but most people think migrating to the cloud is just take what your legacy app and throw it on a infrastructure as a service or platform as a service in the cloud. That's not real true cloud optimization or leveraging the capabilities of the cloud, right? You need to be able to create cloud optimized applications, and that involves a whole bunch of things like containerization and other things, which John's going to talk about. And John and the ASU team have done some amazing work. They have really been trendsetters and leading the whole initiative of cloud migration. And I think a good amount of your infrastructure is now completely in the cloud. In fact, John's going to introduce that as well. So let's please give a very warm welcome to John on the panel, and they're going to introduce themselves when they get up. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. All right. Well, the first thing I realized tonight that Derek is the Kevin Bacon of the room here today. So that's the first thing I realized. But thanks for having us. This is probably Dan's fault. So we're here tonight. So you can either, after we're done, you can either thank Dan or make it his problem. But I'm just really happy to be here. Long time. My name is John Rome, longtime ASU employee, and I can tell you a little bit more about that. So this is what I thought we would do tonight. I have a few slides to tell you a little bit about ASU. You might be interested in some of the things we do, especially around the cloud. And then we're just going to do the panel tonight. And we have a couple prepared questions, but I'm sure there are probably some questions in the audience that we'll take. And I think, Bob, we're going to have you sort of do a little bit at the end, do a summary and do a little wrap up for us. And I think it'll be fun. So make it really, make it a fun evening to start with. So let's go, TJ. Anyway, by the way, the SIMS folks, the leadership of that have been great. So you guys are organized, prepared. You picked a really great place in the university club. And I have one university story. Guys want to hear a university club story? I don't know if it's good or not, but I've been here 30 plus years. And this was like when we decided to build this. Well, first of all, our main internet connection comes in the oldest building on campus. So isn't that great? The internet connection comes into the oldest building on campus. But when this place was going up, they needed a place for the faculty and staff. And all of a sudden, like, we're going to build this place and we're going to have fees and that. And it was great that the students started picketing because we're going to start serving alcohol here. And then so people just would go, you guys can go across the street to the Chuck House if you want. So that's my story. I don't know. It wasn't very good, but I thought it was funny. But anyway, good. Next slide, TJ. If I don't have this slide, we're about openness. And if I don't show this slide, they take away my library card. But just this is one reason I've been here 30 plus years. And I think a lot of the reason why these folks and others in the audience, I see Troy and Dan, this is really a special place to work. And we're not about exclusivity. So it's a great place to be. Next slide, TJ. And so just a little bit about ASU, 134,000 students, if you didn't realize that. There's a lot. And so there's 77,000 in person. So that's all of our campuses around, and then also 57, a big push. I think ASU was great. We saw around the corner, we were able to set up partnerships with companies like Starbucks, Adidas, or Adidas, however you want to say that. And I think we wanted to make sure. So I think that's the great thing about ASU, seeing around it. And then I think our latest initiative, we have something called Learning Enterprises, where we're going to try to work on the K through grade market of how do we work on upskilling. I remember back in the early 2000s, it was like the engineering department could not give a Cisco certification. That was like really against the core of ASU. Now that things have turned, we realize that we have lifetime learners and how do we upskill. So you'll hear more about the Learning Enterprise as well. Big place. Keep going. We also have a Los Angeles office that we were just at, so great place to be. A little bit about our central IT office. We're known as UTO. There's about 550 staff in our central IT organization, about 400 student workers. So we're kind of a big place. Our budget's about 123 million a year, and we do a lot here to support all the students, faculty, and staff. Also, just give you an idea what our COVID spend was, and glad to see that it's coming down. So as you can imagine, we bought a lot of laptops for students who didn't have access to technology, and a lot of MiFi devices as well, to make sure that our students were able to get access as well. Okay, and that's probably the one that you're interested in terms of the public cloud. Those are some big numbers there. So we spent about 6.2 million this year in the cloud, in the public cloud, and that's about 5% of our central IT budget. And if you look at breakdown, remember that we have a central IT and then a lot of distributed IT out there as well. So we do about 85% of our our IT, our cloud spend is essentially. And I just see that I have the slides here. So thanks, TJ. I just realized that. And then for a while, we were like a multi-cloud place. And it was great. One of our last CIO, I think Nate and I forced him to say we were going to become AWS first because people thought it was cheaper to run a Windows server, maybe for 20 cents less a month. But then they forgot that they needed to hire engineers like Jesse to manage those environments. So it's great to see that we're an AWS first shop. But we also have some spend as well as in GCP and Azure for directory services and lead generation, et cetera. And I thought this was very interesting. Since being here for so long, we had this concept of build versus buy. Or buy versus build. And it seemed like that was forever. But now with the cloud, we're realizing there are some things that are strategic to the university, like mobile app, applications like our portal that are really core to the university. So we are like actually building things now where it's been something I would never thought we'd buy forever. Also, we use a lot of different AWS services of that. And then I think this is a number for Nate. I think we're about 65% in the cloud, depending on in terms of, so we've been on this journey for over 5 years. So, all SaaS applications as well as using the public cloud. So is that a good guess?
Well, I'm still here.
What's that? Oh yeah, so you,
I'm still on-prem.
okay, all right. And then when we get to 100, then you can retire. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, next slide, TJ. Okay, and then so these are tonight's panelists. So after Dan asked me to be part of this and I think it was first going to be the cloud. Then he says, "Oh, we're going to talk about containers and that." I'm like, I'm just going to pick out the A team here. So this is really the A team that I brought tonight. So I think they can speak at all levels. We have a builder here. We have Nate, who actually leads the whole engineering team. And so I think I'm looking forward to an exciting discussion tonight. So let's go to the next slide. Well, let's keep it on that slide. I think that's a good place so you can remember who these guys are when you yell their names out. So I think probably the first question I have, raise your hand if you've heard of containerization or containers before. All right, how about Kubernetes? All right, so yeah, people raise their. How about Fiber Channel? I don't know why I said Fiber Channel. It just sounds like a fun word. I like that word. So, but anyway, so good. Seems like you have a little bit of knowledge there. And let's just get started. So I'm going to actually I have a couple prompted questions. So Nate, I'm going to ask you the first question out there. So I think maybe for this audience, Nate, can you give us a quick definition of what you see application modernization is, since that is the topic for tonight?
I can give a quick. Oh, okay. I can give a quick definition, but I can also give a very lengthy definition.
Okay, do you guys want to stay to midnight tonight? I don't think so.
Well, application modernization is a lot of things, but in a nutshell, it's basically updating your existing applications using modern computing technology and modern available technologies and techniques. But it's not just applications, or I generalize the definition of applications to be, web applications, vendor applications, but also the platforms that they run on, the hosts that they run on, the data center that they run in, the racks that they are, installed in. And so when you talk about application modernization, it's impossible not to talk, especially lately, about cloud transformation. And cloud transformation actually borrows a model from cloud transformation borrows a model from application modernization that we call different numbers of R's. In some models, it's the 5 R's. In some models, it's the 6 R's. You just, if you look at these start out with replatform, re-architect, retire, or
Replatform.
Yeah, replatform.
Repurchase.
Oh, repurchase. Yeah, there's a bunch of R's. And if you don't like the list of R's, you just Google 6 R's. And if you don't have the answer there, then you Google 7 R's. And eventually you'll find the right approach for you. But, application modernization in the context of cloud transformation means is heavy on replatform and re-architect, right? So using new techniques, moving from physical servers to virtual servers is a modernization leap. Going from virtual machines to containers is another leap. An orchestration platform for containers is another leap. Serverless architectures like AWS Lambda or Google Compute platforms, Cloud Run services and Cloud Run jobs, functions as a service. That's basically
That's
what we're
good.
talking
I
about.
like that. And then also, we've also heard a lot about lift and shift. So what's the difference between a lift and shift and modernization?
So for our purposes, we refer to lift and shift as rehost. And sometimes that's necessary. I think Simon referred to that earlier. It's just taking what you have on one platform and moving it in its existing form onto an infrastructure as a service platform like a cloud. Sometimes that is the smartest approach if you're constrained in time or resources, or you're executing on a strategy which is to work with your stakeholders, understand what's important to them, what their success criteria is, and make sure that you're advancing their objectives and outcomes and goals. And so sometimes you'll put your refactor or your replatform or your re-architect on hold. Hence retain also, which is
The 6-star.
leave it alone for now, do
All
it
right.
later.
I'll say, and before we leave tonight, we need to come up with a 7th R, okay? So, or maybe that's over happy hour.
Relocate is
Okay.
one of them.
Okay, do we have another R? Arithmetic, all right, that's good, I like it. That's awesome. Okay, so once you pass it down to Jesse, I have a question for Jesse, so thanks, Nate. And so Jesse, I'm just gonna have you just give us a quick explanation to some of the folks might not know what containerization is or what containers are. So maybe you could give us the elevator pitch. You're trying to sell me on what I should use containers.
So containers are basically taking your application and all of its dependencies, including the operating system, and packaging it together. Now that's only part of it. Like you can package it, but then what do you do with it? You need an orchestration platform like Kubernetes to run that. Kubernetes provides a standard interface for storage, networking, security, logging, monitoring, all of that. So what you get out of it is you give the developer the power to build whatever application they want, and you give the operations people you lift the burden from them from configuring servers, from customizing the platform for the application. So it's a really good abstraction between dev and ops, and that's where you kind of get the DevOps, where the developer can do the ops work and the ops person can do some of the dev work.
All right, good. And so what are some examples where ASU and we've built using containers, some of the applications?
So we had an on-prem platform that hosted many of our enterprise web applications. They're mostly Tomcat applications. And we took the opportunity to move those into containers. It was fairly easy to move into containers, and it let us get rid of a whole lot of complexity. Like no longer do we need like special load balancers in the data center or special storage. Like it all runs on Kubernetes. Kubernetes provides the interface, so we can run it wherever we want. We don't care what the underlying infrastructure is. It happens to be in AWS, but we could run it on-prem or another cloud. And that's the majority of the applications we've moved. We've also done modern stuff. We have like Slack bots. We have cloud native applications that have serverless components. So we've quite a few. I think we have, so in Kubernetes, an instance of an application is a pod, and we have about 1,000 pods running in our production environment.
All right, thanks, Jesse. So let's hand it over to Matt now. So Matt is actually a builder. So I would say he's a little junior to these guys, but he's junior to all of us. But he's one of, how many years ago did you graduate? 4 or 5 years ago?
I'd say maybe around 4.
Okay.
Four.
But anyway,
4
I
years
just
ago.
I thought we would bring some. I thought it would be nice to give a nice sort of a context to someone who's actually builder, someone who's actually using Kubernetes in their daily job. So Matt, how has stack modernization instilled empowerment in development?
Yeah, so the first thing that kind of comes to mind is that as a developer, I've kind of been given every chance to succeed at building my applications, from the inception and creation to deployment, all the way to testing it. And basically every step of the way, there's support to be had by everybody that works at DevOps, and kind of the applications that I've worked on are all built on top of some of the work that Jesse and Nate have laid down, and it's been a very strong foundation, I think. I kind of joke with my coworkers in the sense that I'm a professional copy paster. A lot of the work that I do is copied material from people with more knowledge as far as like how best to build the Docker container that it is that I'm looking for, or how best to host infrastructure that I aim on deploying to AWS. And so it's been quite a unique experience being part of that transition where ASU is going from on-prem, from the old way of doing things, to moving towards this cloud acceleration effort, moving things into the cloud, and of course going beyond that scope and modernizing and containerizing things. I much prefer working that way because it gives me the freedom that I need as a developer to be able to put together the apps that I have in mind. So,
All right, so do we have another question?
We have a question from online. So Vishwa asks, why AWS? If you were to start all over again, would you still be AWS first?
Can you repeat the question first? Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I think the question online was, why did ASU decide AWS first? So I know that Nate knows this answer because
I have to navigate this question very carefully because we do have a very strong relationship both with Microsoft, the Azure team, and with GCP. And there is a very significant amount of spend in GCP, but it was important at the beginning of this, what we call the cloud acceleration journey, to focus our professional development and upskilling in the community of folks and as a community of professionals. And so, the question of, well, what is a differentiator for AWS for us? And I think it was our existing length and breadth of experience in AWS to that point. So we had been experimenting with AWS, sort of bucking the nose from folks internally, since 2006, 2007 or so. Somebody traces back our first
email.
Can I say that we used a P card for
Sure,
one of our first AWS accounts? Yeah. Right. So I think it wasn't so much, I think it was just because AWS sort of had a first mover advantage. And there were fundamentally different approaches. The Google approach to cloud compute was really focused initially on developers and kind of forcing a complete rethinking of application architectures from a developer perspective. And AWS initially focused on, if we're going to have big business move their data centers to our cloud infrastructure, they need to be able to solve all of the problems that they're solving today in their physical infrastructure. And so I think they had a much more broad spectrum of available IaaS, infrastructure as a service and platform as a service offerings. So I think that's fair. I think
I think you
could say that
navigated that
directly
pretty
to
well.
Lorena.
So,
Yeah.
I navigated that well. So I'm going to open it up now. I'm going to have one more question, and if any questions in the audience. But looking at this group there, I'm guessing that some of them are either working in the cloud, probably working with containerization. But where would you start? Like, where do I start if I want to go get into this application modernization? Like, what's a good place to start? What's the low hanging
man.
fruit?
Well, the best place to start was about 8 years ago. Yes. I mean, really, from my perspective, talk to your engineers, like find out what they think is the best thing, right? Like that's how we started with AWS. Like Nate it wasn't a strategic decision, right? It was the engineers that decided because that's what they were familiar with and that's what they liked. And they'll know, we know, okay, the first thing we want to move is our homepage. It's a relatively simple architecture. It can be cloud native very easily. So let's move that. And then, move towards more complex applications, off the shelf applications, things like that are, that will take a little more effort.
All right. Yeah, please do.
Unless you'd like to.
Oh, no.
So I want to go back to my earlier comment about application modernization could be a series of lectures. I think lecture number 2 is about the side effects and application modernization. This, when John told me about this question ahead of time, I thought I might actually start with that answer, which was, but I think now it's germane to this question. And that is, the modernization isn't just about getting to the latest patches of the libraries and the OS and the platform and orchestration tools. It's about your environment being marketable to the best talent that's available. And for us, it's the talent that we already had. And making sure that engineers like Matthew are empowered in ways that they initiate themselves. So I think that's really important for you to eventually deliver on the business value of a cloud transformation or an application modernization. It's empowering your engineers to use the latest tools and technologies and have the most fun and engaging experience in the office,
Right.
or at home, or hybrid.
Do you build containers at home, Nate, on your off time?
I do. Most of my house is containerized now.
Okay. Is that in your pantry area? Is that where it's containerized? Okay. So also so maybe for this, remember, anyone has questions, please raise your hand. But also how do they get ready? How do they train a team? How do they upskill to get the staffs ready for this modernization? What do you recommend?
I think Matt would have a great answer.
Could you repeat the question? Could you repeat the question?
Oh, so so a lot of audience here, we have a lot of leadership here, and they're thinking about, okay, how do I get into application modernization? How do I train a staff? How do I build a team that will be able to do this?
I think kind of along the lines of what Jesse had mentioned, start with the low hanging fruit and then make your way towards the more complex projects. That was definitely something that helped us as a group to be able to kind of lay the foundation for what it is that we need to know, what it is that we don't know, what it is that we don't even know that we don't know. And so kind of laying the groundwork for just establishing a foundation or a workflow that works for your engineers. That's
Okay,
kind
thanks.
of how I'm summarizing that. Yeah.
So, engineers like to play with things and try things. And by doing that, they learn a lot, right? So you really need to give them time. Like we know Google, they give engineers 20% time. Like if you give your engineers that time, they will train themselves, so I think that's important.
Nate, I'll give you the final word on that question.
And they will train each other. I think the community of collaboration that happened, the senior engineer, those who have had time to practice, that bleeds into a culture of continuous professional development. One thing that we did as part of our strategy for cloud acceleration was to co-locate engineers so that they could, it kind of, when the more junior or less experienced engineers see the more senior engineers, expressing grit and perseverance and figuring out the problem the hard way. A lot of that is people overhearing conversations and finding opportunities to ask questions and learn from each other. And we set up a model of mentoring and coaching that hasn't been perfect, but I think was definitely helpful in getting started. And the Cloud Acceleration Group itself was also learning from and teaching our information security office and our CISO about what the risks are and what modern approaches are to mitigate those risks and implement controllables.
Very great. So question in the back.
My question is, earlier, there was a question about moving to containers and what are the benefits, and I think what I heard was flexibility with infrastructure, right? You can move workloads anywhere, and so that's what the answer was about, but I haven't heard much, and I'm curious to know your perspective. I'm learning this space, so I introduced myself. I've only been in the Kubernetes and container space for about 6 months, but it's my impression and understanding that the benefit of moving to containers offers you a lot more flexibility in the way of being more nimble with your applications. And like, we're also high maintenance as consumers, right? We want the latest and greatest, and we want it updated quick. With monolithic approaches, organizations have to move more slowly. This is kind of a question. This is my impression, right? With a monolithic approach, you're moving more slowly, and you can't cater to your consumers as well and as flexible as you'd be able to in a containerized environment. Does that make sense? And if so, like, are those some of the benefits that you're embracing?
Flexibility is one of the potential promises of containerization, but I think Jesse was spot on when he said it was more about simplification. So it was about reducing the complexity, because our business doesn't wait or doesn't hear our excuses like, yes, we can make that happen, but it would be really complex, or we haven't done that before. Don't you think you'd rather do this instead because that's the platform that we have. Those are the skills that we have. And so I think, containerization allows you to build based on an abstract model of what the platform and infrastructure looks like, so that you can, have a Kubernetes cluster running in GCP, one running in AKS, one running in EKS, and they all have a common, like, you can just literally move your pods and replica sets, deployments around all over the place. So.
So you touched on, basically what you touched on is agility, right? Like improving deployment speed. We know that high performing companies have high deployment speeds. Containers can help with that because your deployment pipelines are more standardized, because, what's in the container, the pipeline doesn't really care about how it deploys, is all the same. So it can help you increase your rate of deployment. It can help you, with automated testing, that kind of things. But it's not, that containerization isn't the solution to that. It's really more cultural, right? It's being agile. It's embracing automation, that kind of thing.
One of the more valuable experiences I've had with Docker as well is being able to kind of reproduce the same environment. So, with a higher degree of confidence that if my application's working in QA or non-prod, that it'll also work in production as well. And so having those analytic tools available to me before I go live is definitely a big plus for any developer.
That's a good point. So Mark, you had a question?
Yeah, 1 second.
Okay.
And by the way, before I pass over to Mark, there is some desserts in the back. Go and grab them, right? So don't be shy.
I might forget about my question now because I'm going to think about dessert. Just a operational question. Just like a server, right? You're going to have security updates that are going to come through, especially when you got Apache involved, right? Do you deploy all new containers with the patches and then deploy new code in another iteration? Or do you put it together and have the risk of one of them, the two, getting in the way of each other?
It depends. You were probably expecting that answer. That you have a lot of, I think the answer isn't tied to the platform and technology like Kubernetes or containerization itself. There are, using containers does, it's just another architecture or approach. Like, so for example, for enterprise web applications, we might standardize the base image So if I could, without going into too much detail, the way containers are built is sort of in layers. And so if there's a common dependency set for an application that Matt writes versus one that I write, we can agree on a common base layer. And then we can have a CI/CD pipeline or an automated deployment pipeline, just constantly running and building with the latest versions of those dependencies and those, catching updates all the way from and patches all the way from the operating system to the application server to the library dependencies that the application uses. And then Matt can build his application on top of that. And then his application pipeline just references that base image that's always up to date. So every time it deploys, it builds based on whatever the latest image is. And we actually, we use tools in order to scan those base images to map those against CVEs or known vulnerabilities and anti-patterns. And when a new one pops up, that image turns maroon or purple, or depending on how severe it is, it turns a darker shade of red. And then we can run the pipeline again and get the latest updates and then redeploy the application. So that's sort of automated application modernization to a certain degree, but that's because we've designed our pipeline that way, and containers made it easy to do that. That's definitely true.
So when you're in Kubernetes, you still have servers underneath, right? But the way that you patch is different. Like, we just terminate those instances. The auto scaling group will bring up new instance that's the latest image. Kubernetes will redeploy the containers onto it. So it's totally different way to handle things. The image is tested, ideally, before it's deployed. And it just simplifies the whole process, right? It's the pets versus cattle thing, if you've heard that. Yeah. And we treat our servers like cattle. If something's wrong, we just terminate the instance and let it spin up a new one that's identical. So.
We don't have any online questions. You have a question. Hang on 1 second. The benefit of the online participants.
So I'm sorry, what struck us over here is when you said, and test ideally. A lot of us would not even consider putting anything into production without going through some thorough testing. So how are you finding your success ratio with that? And what do you do when it are you also perfect that it never tanks?
We're definitely not perfect.
Gosh, we're all old timers, aren't we? Yes, go on. I'm the same.
So
Exactly.
one of the things that we get with the agility is the ability to rapidly deploy, and that includes rapidly rolling back. So if we, ideally we would test everything, but testing is really hard. Like, how do you test your infrastructure as a service? Like, it's difficult. So yeah, you do small pieces, like, if we have a Kubernetes cluster with X nodes, we'll do X, over 3 at one time, right? And see how it behaves. If something's wrong, then we just tell it not to use those nodes anymore, right? You can do, blue, green, you can deploy a parallel set, the new version in parallel, and, move traffic over to it. There's lots of ways you can do it without, by letting your users test, right? Like, blue, green, you say, oh, we'll send 5% of users to the application and we'll monitor, right? So at least it's not like a global outage, right? So.
And I think I can add to that too. And that is, one of the important motivators for CI/CD, which is this rapid and automated deployment pipeline, build and deploy, is that you can do it much faster and do it much more often. That's been sort of our mantra, which is to, release, to drive up the number of releases. And what you get out of doing, and by the way, that's there's a whole campaign with your stakeholders that needs to take place to sort of make them comfortable with that idea. But what we suffered from before was a stakeholder would say, oh, I got my project prioritized finally. Now that I'm engaged, I want this release to have everything I ever thought of and everything that I can think of while I still am executing on this release or on this project. And so what we try to do is release more often so that the delta is much smaller, which reduces the risk and reduces the impact of failures on our users, our learners, and our faculty. So I think testing is still important. Automated testing is sort of a principle that we've adopted that, you saw the charter for Arizona State University, and it's very ambitious. So for us to achieve that charter, as long as there are people that don't have access to education, we must grow. And we cannot grow linearly as an IT organization. We must find ways to scale faster and get exponential value from our existing engineers. And so one way that we do that is reducing toil, reducing complexity, automation. Yeah. So.
Simon, you look like you have.
I do. So in my day job, I work for a firm that does cybersecurity incident response, right? So we bail companies out who are either burning to the ground or are burned to the ground. Okay, so the concept of release stuff and fail fast. Hopefully, we understand the problems before they turn into real problems. Is you don't want Conti ransomware group getting into your system immediately. But what it brought to mind is DevOps is complicated enough. So what is DevSecOps? And doesn't that sound more comforting in this sort of environment?
Yeah, I think DevSecOps or DevOps presupposed DevSecOps, and adding the sec really, is sort of not marketing, but a cultural ad to make sure that everybody understands that security is part of the equation, always by everyone. And so it's not that you have your DevOps group and your security group. We just had this conversation yesterday. As a matter of fact, every IT professional is a security professional. And so DevSecOps is a way to emphasize that culturally, and not just internally, but also to socialize that with your stakeholders so that they understand, security is not something that you do after the fact. And it's not something that's optional, like the security training and professional development is not something, it's not the set of tools that you buy after you, have the cash flow from your release. Yeah.
Well, I love the idea of ingraining it into the culture. Unfortunately, I don't see it in reality most of the time. But anyway, any other, just on conscious of time, any other questions from folks? Yeah, John.
So this is a question about culture, because there's been some other, comments and questions about monolithic apps and stuff. And there's nothing about containers that prevent you from building a monolithic app, right? You can just destroy it and build it again really quickly, maybe. And then the questions about patching and that kind of stuff. And I think in my experience, if you go from a culture that doesn't do patching and they say, oh, well, we'll build stuff in containers and then patching will happen and it'll be great. But they have no culture to do that. So it won't happen. So I think culture is a really big part of that application modernization process, and going from, especially if you've got a case where you're not doing those operational things that you should have been doing. Going to containers and modernizing your app isn't going to fix that unless you have a culture change as well.
I could not agree more. Absolutely. Good. Any comments on that?
How many times have I heard, oh, I'm going to the cloud, so I'm now safe? Sorry, it's still your job, right? So, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So how often do you see people looking to migrate from Windows servers to containers? And how do you respond to those individuals?
Besides like the platform, the container platform team, which is basically us, I don't think we've had any ask for that. We want to do it. For us, the Windows environment is more, off the shelf applications. And so you really, you need a little bit of vendor support to do it. And we're not really seeing it yet. Windows has kind of lagged behind in our transformation to the cloud, but we're working to catch up on that.
Why is that? Why is it lagging?
It's just, the engineers that started the cloud journey were more on the Linux side, which, I think probably everybody has seen that's, we're more open source. All of these tools have like open source origins. So it's easier on that side, right? To repackage applications, to switch technologies, where on the Windows side, you have, application extender, for instance. Like, are you going to containerize that without the support of the vendor? No, like it's not going to happen. Like, so you really need, more support from the vendors on the Windows side.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I think this goes to the question, the cultural question earlier about, you can build monolithic apps in containers. And a lot of the off-the-shelf applications that we run in a Windows environment, we run them in the Windows environment because that's the environment that they were built for. And they're almost always monolithic in nature. And so we don't get much value in expending the effort to containerize them because, Jesse's point, like it's certified to run on a particular type of virtual machine in a particular cloud, for example, or the license, for example, may not be portable to the cloud that you've chosen. And so, that's another, speaking of licensing, a lot of licenses, the license model, doesn't translate necessarily yet to the container architecture. So for example, when you have a vendor that sells their product based on cores, for example, and they define a core as a number of virtual CPUs, for example, versus the number of cores in the underlying host that's running Kubernetes, one of your nodes. So that makes it difficult as well.
All right, thank you so much. So we're kind of out of time. Bob was going to just say a couple of words before we thank the panel. So do you want to just do a little 30-second summary of what you?
Yeah, so I know there's a lot discussed tonight, so I put together a quick little recap. So Nate discussed the seven R's, actually the 6 R's of moving to the cloud. Is it 5, 6, 7? Right. I knew this was going to be the toughest one to go over. We also addressed what lift and shift is. Jesse talked about containers and Kubernetes and the movement to containers. Matthew talked about his experiences with building them. We also talked about the differences between Google, AWS, and Azure. The complexity and simplifications achieved by containers. I won't go into the details. Security updates. So we also talked about security updates and testing of containers using tools to scan the images. We also talked about automated testing. So ability to automate the testing of the containers, so the software inside of them for quick deployment, as well as segregating one's audience, failing fast. And then we also talked about DevSecOps as a cultural shift, and then Windows containers in the cloud.
And next time we'll talk about cost management.
Wow. So, yeah, exactly. So I really want us to all to thank John. Great moderation. Thank you very much. Nate, Matthew, Jesse, fantastic stuff. So you don't all have to rush off. You can stick around for a while, get to chat to these folks, share some stories, ask some questions. That's what it's about. We're not all being kicked out just yet. Anybody who wants to take any food home, there's a limited number of to-go boxes. So first come, first serve. But if somebody wants to take anything home, make a mad dash right now without killing each other. That would be very good. So just want to thank you again for making this such a fantastic session. Really great to see so many people, and the ratio of online to in person is markedly changing month by month. Really love to see it. So thanks so much. Have a very safe journey home. Do stick around. Yes. Oh yes. We never do this. This is why. So this is unfortunately for the this will stop you not being a virtual person, right? So in fact, John was so kind to introduce the raffle then, John.
Sure. So as you know, we do a lot of work with not only AWS, but also with Amazon. And we've run programs around actually recruitment programs. So how do we bring cloud scholars to ASU? And we've done it twice, bringing in about 600 or 700 students. And typically what we do is we hand out Echo Dots. Well, you're lucky tonight, we had a few Echo Dots sitting around the office. I brought those in. We also, up at our SkySong office, we tried to build some things, and we had some the larger Echo Show. So I brought one of those in. You might have to reset that because we were trying to build a network around it, but it's all legit. Yeah, it's all legit out there. So am I going to pick then? Okay. All right, I feel very special. Can you read them for us? I'll read it. Okay, so this is actually for one of the Echo Dots. We'll have three, I think we have 3 of those, and then the Echo shows the grand prize. Okay, so it's 981-0164. Going once. Okay. Well, I just picked up a 0164, so I think we just found it. So someone put both of them in. What are they? Oh, let's see. No name. Okay, so the next one is 122, the last 3 digits. All right, good. Come on down. No one's listening, trust me. No one's listening. Okay, the next one is 166. All right, we'll go to the next one. These guys all got one already, so. All right, the next one. All right, 175. All right, good, all right. Okay, the next one is 177. Bingo, all right. The arithmetic lady wins a Echo Dot. Okay, now drum roll, please. Can someone do the drum roll? This is for the big, wait, we better shake this up. Let's be very dramatic about it. Okay, so the winner of the Echo Show is 165. All right, awesome. All right, we believe you. You don't have to shout, yeah. All right, well, thanks everyone. Have a great night. Thanks for the opportunity. Dan, thanks for the invitation. So, all right, thanks, Simon.
Thanks for the cover up.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for